right, so good afternoon to you. Our next session focuses on expanding learning ecologies for success through campus space. And this will be co-presented by Dr. Constance Kupe, who is an academic advisor and senior lecturer in the Faculty of Health Sciences in the Office of Student Success. And her work experience spans through teaching in high schools and in pre-service and in-service teacher education. She was first in her family to achieve a post-secondary qualification, and her upbringing and work in rural communities actually shaped her interest in decolonial methodologies, transformative learning, and her approach to academic advising. Um, Constance has led an academic advising intervention research project that has customized the Success Sprints Crash Course board game to the Wits University context. Thank you for co-presenting, Constance. Um, the other co-facilitator is Dr. Louis Botha, who is a senior lecturer at the Wits School of Education, and he facilitates around the sociology of education, inclusive education, and transformative education and research, mainly at the postgraduate level. And his research is concerned with the marginalization and transformation of knowledges within contexts of learning, teaching, and research. Now, together with Dr. Kupe and other researchers from various disciplines and from various institutions around the country, they've actually started a chat-based research group called the Joburg Chat Collective, through which they attempt to assist local chat researchers, including postgraduate students, with expanding their knowledge and skills in using and adapting the chat framework for local research. I'd like to welcome them and we look forward. Over to you.
Thank you very much. What we are presenting this afternoon is actually a project proposal. So we have written up the proposal, but we are requesting for colleagues' input in how we chart the way forward. Speakers in the morning spoke about collaboration, about solidarity, and I like the illustration that Prof. Osman used about, the cook perhaps in the residencies and the lecturer in the faculty, how they can all be thinking about student success in a similar way. So this is what we hope to achieve with this project. So we have structured the presentation for us to be giving you a bit of background and then what the project focus is. And Dr. Botha will speak to the theoretical framework as well as the methodology. And ultimately, we have some speculations and which we hope to include you in that conversation as well. So when we look at how universities were structured and constructed in the past, we think that it was mainly with a cognitive development of students in mind. If we just look at this room, for instance, we do have teaching and learning spaces that are structured in the same way, where student work is individualized and there is very little focus on the relational aspect of students as a contributor to success. But research now is increasingly suggesting a shift away from focusing only on academics towards an understanding of the campus also as a physical space that can enhance both the social connections that students need to have, and learning. So that building of social interactions, there's been quite a bit of research into it. And my colleague here, Dr. Ndofirepi, is one of those South African researchers. We have done quite a bit of work into the idea of campus spaces. So this shift of thinking of universities as socio-cultural spaces, it's something that we need to keep thinking about, so that in between lectures, after lectures, students have a hangout area where they can connect with one another and also continue learning in the same way that we would expect them while in the classroom. And most literature in this regard actually comes from the global north and might not take into account the many complexities that we have been speaking about throughout the morning and afternoon. And we also know that our own universities within the global south take after the culture of the global north. And so studies have also shown that some of our students, and at current enrollment levels, it could actually be the majority, who find there is cultural dissonance between their own culture and the university culture. And they find it hard to have a sense of belonging, to persist through university and to succeed, however our definition of success might be. So it's something that we need to keep exploring from that perspective. So we are thinking of the student campus experience to be made up of different environments. As you can see, it's not just the formal classroom space, but there are also the other formal learning spaces like the libraries, computer labs, and so on. Accommodation is part of it. Whether the accommodation is on campus or it's off campus, we think that is also an important space. The out of classroom spaces in their different forms, we think those are also very important spaces. So they all shape the total experience that students end up having. So in the light of all this complexity, there have been suggestions that viewing university, it would be helpful to view the university as a social ecosystem. And we know many of the friendships that students make in university become lifelong. Sometimes students find their students marry, some of their colleagues or their peers from university. So there is a lot of social connections that actually happen. And as a university, how can we harness those or harness that potential through creating those spaces? I'm not saying we should create like spaces where we encourage marriage, but I'm just saying the social connections that students have. And we are thinking that maybe expanding those learning ecologies beyond the classroom settings could actually be an enhancer for the success and throughput that we are looking for, rather than just looking for it in the classroom or within the teaching space. So we think the gap that is there is pushing more of the work, maybe perhaps that Ndofrepi and a few others in South Africa have done, to say how can we keep looking into the potential of these learning spaces of these physical spaces at university as a way of enhancing success. And that would also help in our interventions, not just focusing on student characteristics, which is currently the case. Our tutoring, our maybe our advising, our financial aid, or whatever happens within residencies and so on, we are focusing on trying to bridge the characteristics that students come with. But we have not done a lot of work in trying to see, as an institution, how do we also contribute either positively or negatively to the student experience and to their success. So this is the angle that our project is coming with. So the proposal that we have is to have a project that aims to expand learning ecologies for success through drawing on students' funds of knowledge. We had a panel just earlier on, and we could hear. I saw some comments from online, and the students had profound suggestions that they were making, which means they do have deep funds of knowledge. We might have expertise in our disciplines, but I think from their experience, they do have a lot, and also drawing from their cultural world to explore the potential contribution of campus spaces in fostering students' sense of belonging, learning, wellness, achievement, and ultimately success. And we hope that our project will both focus not just on the outcomes, but also on the process of actually getting there. And so we hope to identify existing campus spaces um, and collaborate together with students and staff from different departments on how we can enhance that social interaction for student well-being, sense of belonging and success, and identify from students' suggestions as well as from the literature any additional out of classroom spaces that could be used for the benefit of students. And so from this smaller proposal, we are hoping to work with students on the Parktown campus, undergraduate students from the School of Education as well as from the Health Sciences campus. The reason why we are bringing these together is that they are distanced from the main campus here on the Braamfontein campuses. They do not usually participate in events, social events, and so on that happen on this campus because of the distance, especially if the events happen during the school week. These are also students who happen to have calendars that are different from the one of the faculties this side. So sometimes they are on campus when everyone else is not on campus, or they are not on campus when everyone else is on campus. So we thought there were similarities in that population, which we could use as a starting point for our project. And the research questions that we hope to answer have one main question and then 4 sub-questions. So the main question is, how can expansive learning ecologies be developed through formative interventions with students? Sub-question 1, what existing out of classroom campus spaces and or facilities do students experience as promoting social interaction, collaborative learning, well-being, and a sense of belonging? What other additional spaces and facilities could add value in promoting student social interaction, collaborative learning, well-being, and a sense of belonging? How can social connections and a sense of belonging be developed among students through developing learning ecology spaces? And what are the benefits of the additional spaces and facilities in promoting student social interaction, well-being, and a sense of belonging? I will stop there for a while and hand over to Dr. Botha.
Um, so I'll try to elaborate a little bit on the theoretical framework for our project. So if we think about those research questions, we can see that we're trying to bring together several aspects, agency, um, structures, and so forth. And for that reason, we think that the cultural historical activity theory is a good theory to do that. Um, what is very good about this theory is that it, as you can see, considers people's history of engagement in practices. So when we think of culture in this context, we are not thinking of it as something that we think of as people born into a certain culture or something like that, but it's about their history of engagement with certain practices. And this engagement is usually mediated by certain tools, both abstract and concrete, and also by rules and so forth. And together, through this kind of engagement, people are usually looking to achieve certain things. And so the cultural activity theory allows us to understand people's activity in this way, to understand what it is that their activity is oriented towards. And so um, it looks something like this, like the diagram on the left there, where we use this activity system to analyze and also to construct or intervene in uh, um, particular activities, people's activities. So an activity system, as you can see there, um, from the top small bit of the triangle, that looks at, for example, the individual, the subject, and what the subject is trying to achieve in terms of the object, which is the objective of, um, of the activity. And that object is mediated by what we see on the top there, the instruments or the artifacts. And in that example, we see some, for example, um, uh, instruments like curriculum and lesson plans and all of those kinds of things which relate to education. And so that speaks to the kind of individual, the subject perspective. But if we look at the lower part of that triangle, we then find rules, community, and division of labor, and that is the communal aspect of an activity, because every activity is, of course, situated within a communal or cultural context from this point of view. And so this activity system gives us then very powerful tools to understand how these various what we could call moments or elements in the activity system, how they interact, and that interaction we see there through those two-headed arrows, which in fact indicated a kind of a dialectical relationship. But those relationships are, of course, not always smooth going. The instruments don't always fit with the objective, and with the division of labor, or the rules don't fit with what the subject is trying to do, and so forth. And so we also consider contradictions between those elements there, and those are quite powerful. But essentially, we can see how this activity system or cultural historical activity theory can help us to account for various elements um, of the kind of activity that we want to do. Um, and then a part of the cultural activity theory process is an expansive learning process. So with expansive learning, we understand it to be not a growth that is kind of cumulative, but the development of something completely new, something that hasn't been there before. And so what happens is that in an expansive learning process, you have these various steps, which we see starts there with questioning. And what happens is that the participants in an activity will question whether things could be different. And they would then go on to analyze how and why things need to change, try to model some new solutions, and from there examine and test their model. And this then goes further on to implementing the model and reflecting about it, and eventually consolidating that in a new form of practice. And this expansive learning process is a collective process. So you go from individual perspectives and ideas about the issue, and people come together with the questioning, the analysis, and until we eventually develop a collective solution or a new idea about the issue that we were understanding as a kind of a problem. So in our methodology, we actually employ or manifest that expansive learning process, and that expansive learning process can take the form of formative interventions. So these formative interventions are also chat-based interventions, and one form of or one example is the Change Laboratory, which is essentially an expansive learning process that happens as a workshop. So you bring people together in a very particular way, and they do that process of questioning. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong slide. So they do that process of questioning, and then analyzing, modeling, and so forth, as we saw in those 7 expansive learning steps. And this formative intervention I just put up there is very particular in that it makes use of very particular strong theoretical tools, which we can see the double stimulation ascending from the abstract to the concrete and transformative agency. And the reason why I mention those is because those are very powerful tools in assuring that in our case, for example, the participants, that we can trace and activate the agency of the participants in the process. And then we will also use social design-based experiments. And what I want to highlight there in that aspect, which is also chat-based methodology, but in designing these spaces, the Gutierrez explained as involving proleptic forms of design organized around the utopian ideal. And those are very important, because for us, we, as you will see in a minute, we want to imagine the most utopian kind of spaces that we can, and those then will drive where we go with our projects. So yeah, that the idea of what we represent and then pulling ourselves towards that ideal is very important in our methodology.
So we hope to generate data in different ways, and that is also based on what comes from the collaborative engagement that we have with all the stakeholders and participants. So we hope to use a variety of ethnographic observations, a variety of methods rather, ethnographic observations, interviewing, focus group discussions, photo voice, um, and other forms of voice like poetry, like so all forms of what could appeal to the students as especially as for students from their social cultural backgrounds. And so these are some of the spaces that we have identified on our campuses. Um, um, there is quite a lot of beauty and also a lot of potential, perhaps. We do not know. And the question that we have for the audience is how would we transform this kind of space? This particular picture was taken in the Harold Holmes library. It's the courtyard there. And how would you transform that space into a space where students could connect with one another and where they could also learn at the same time? This is an open question to ask. Any suggestions?
Colleagues, I think our facilitators are looking to you for some input.
Yes.
I don't really see any opportunity there for people to sit together comfortably and interact and engage. So there's no real seating. Right now it's in shade, but it looks like it might be really not shady in the cool, midday sun. But I think primarily there's no opportunity, there's no encouragement from a space design space for people to, space design perspective for people to interact with each other at any length in a way that they can forget about physical discomfort and focus on cognitive discomfort.
Thank you. And then,
Yes.
yeah, please.
So I think maybe what you need to look at is the spaces on this campus that students are using to interact, like the matrix, the library lawns, and the auditorium. And now you can create spaces that are similar to that, because from my experience on education and the health science campus, there isn't really a space like that for students to go to. So maybe try and look at what the students are doing here, and then you can replicate that there.
Thank you. And
So thank you. But my issue there is that it's the library. And I would suggest that you put some chairs there, but I'm thinking, won't that be too noisy now for the students inside the library?
noise. Yes. Last contribution. I'm aware of the time.
Okay, thank you for your presentation and the proposal and the research. It sounds very interesting. And equally so, I've researched quite in a lot in spaces on campus. And if you go on literature, especially from America, you find that unlike our libraries where there's quietness, their libraries are very busy. They've created spaces where students just sit and interact, while others are inside. The others sit in such spaces and in a way that allow them to socialize. So there's that it's really possible, and that's what they are doing in America, in the other countries. Thank you.
Thank you
Yes,
so
I
much.
come in.
Yeah.
So, in 2019, the university started a project on learning and innovation design spaces. And we started off with the main library, the Morton Weiler Library. And there was a space in the library where students, it was reframed actually, structurally and socially, and in many ways. And students could actually come in, including us, staff members who could go in and engage in innovation, socialize, transact, whatever it was. There was also supposed to be a coffee bar, and I know because I was part of that committee. But then COVID came through, and then I think plans came down on it. But we still have that space, so maybe we could look at blueprints that we have. The university would be willing to share.
Thank you so much. Thank you. COVID, yeah.
Thanks. I can't see this from now, but just looking at the space, I think you need to take a step back to see how accessible is that space for students with disabilities, or how easy it is for them to maneuver into the building and into that space it's in fact, and perhaps also to make it very informal in terms of maybe having grass or something where students can just sit and feel comfortable in that space, and not a structured seating space itself. Thanks.
Thank you so much, especially for bringing in the accessibility part in that. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. My comment is probably more, maybe also just stepping a few steps back, is we seeing an increase in students disengaging from wanting to have to be part of connected spaces. And so I was just wondering if you know, have you how informed is the need? Have you done sort of like a needs assessment to you know, to sort of like gauge whether it is something students want or not, um, particularly in light of this, you know, the prevalence of students' disengagement.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Constance is two colleagues online. It's Professor Agadine, who has done extensive research. I think this was her PhD study at social learning spaces, and she's offered assistance, so she can chat to you.
Thank you.
And then our director, Dr. Vasin, has suggested somebody that you could speak to who's looking at similar spaces.
Thank
So
you.
you've got a lot of input here, hey?
Thank you so much.
Okay.
And we really appreciate all the contributions, and maybe just to answer Dr. Richards around the question of needs assessment, we have not done that. We hope, because this would be a co-generative kind of project, we hope to hear what students say. If they say everything is fine, we'll probably stop there. And we, even though our age does not quite do well with AI, but we did ask AI to transform that library courtyard. And these were some of the suggestions that came through. And as Dr. Ndofirepe was also saying, that this is the thing in the developed world, they are trying to informalize, maybe not informalize is not the right word, but to create these informal spaces where students can sit and engage with each other. I think they become very helpful spaces. So we then expect all forms of data. We are not even sure of the direction of the data at this point, but it could be photographs, it could be transcripts, it could be poems, it could be songs, it could be all sorts of things that students may be able to come up with, whether they take the idea or not. And hopefully the expected outcome would be that we would have expanded the the spaces, our physical spaces, into more social cultural spaces, into relational spaces, into spaces where students can engage with one another before we even think of them engaging with us. I saw a hand. Oh, okay. So yeah, so I think this is where we are at. Apart from the contribution, you competing with AI on how that space could be transformed, we welcome any feedback that you might have and any suggestions. Thank you.